Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I have your attention, please? Thank you very much. Let me start off by saying it is very good to see all of you this afternoon. The reason why we gathered here this afternoon is to launch the 4th NLRD National Learners Record Database Trends Report. Now, on the program that you have in front of you, you would see that I am meant to make a number of opening remarks and also to welcome you. What I want to do is to say that the program is slightly changed in this sense that the chairperson of the SAQA board is going to formally welcome you. I will make my remarks a little bit later on. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome the chairperson of SAQA to say the formal welcome. Can we put our hands together for Dr. Vuyelwa Pentla?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Program Director, Mr. Joe Samuels, the COO of SAQA, past and present board members of the SAQA board. Can you hear me? Past and present members of the SAQA board, Deputy Director General of the Department of Higher Education and Training, Dr. Sishi, Chief Director for Curriculum of the Department of Basic Education, Mr. Govender, CEOs and staff of the Quality Councils, CEOs and staff of the SITAs and professional bodies, present and past SAQA staff.
Don't mind me.
Okay. All protocols duly observed. Once more, good evening to you all. It is my pleasure and duty to welcome you all officially to this function this afternoon. The South African Qualifications Authority, SAQA, is proud to bring to you this 4th report from its National Learners Records Database, that is the NLRD. In the last 20 years, SAQA has made great strides in advancing the objectives of the National Qualifications Framework, the NQF. In its capacity as the custodian of the NQF, one of SAQA's functions is to develop and maintain a management information system that provides relevant and accessible education and skills development information to the people of South Africa to assist with policy making and decision making. The creation of the NLRD has indeed helped in fulfilling this mandate. With data on more than 17 million people currently recorded in the system, the NLRD provides information on learner achievements, qualifications and part qualifications, including unit standards registered on the NQF, recognition or recognized professional bodies and their professional designations, the 3 quality councils, sector education and training authorities, the SITAs, accredited providers, and registered assessors. In 2004, the NLRD Directorate at SAQA produced its first publication on trends. It focused in the trends in the public higher education in South Africa from 1992 to 2001. The Directorate subsequently published 2 other reports. These reports looked at the further trends in public higher education in South Africa. It also looked at trends in work-related qualifications and part qualifications from 2002 to 2011. The fourth NLRD Trends Report that we are launching today examines the trends in education and training from 1995 to 2014. This report also provides a brief exploration into the different educational pathways taken by learners in the same period. The insights in the publication should be of interest to all of us because it records the progress we have made over the last 20 years as a country in the field of education and training. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating SAQA for keeping us informed and updated on developments in our evolving education and training landscape. To highlight a few strengths or strong areas pertaining to the NLRD, I will mention the following. It has the capacity to host and manage big data sets such as the National Learner Records as well as Foreign Qualifications database. It is the largest database of learner achievements and is considered to be a national asset. It is the only recognized database of registered qualifications and professional designations. And the NLRD indicates some articulation that is already occurring. It will fuel discussions and inform our current debates on important issues such as articulation, early childhood development, and others. It is indeed a great honor to welcome you all to this launch of the fourth SAQA Trends Report this afternoon. With those few words, I welcome you all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Now that we all feel very welcome, there's a couple of things that I would like to just bring to your attention. Living in the 21st century, we cannot let an opportunity go by without tweeting, without going on Facebook, amongst others. So the hashtag that we would like you to use when you are tweeting is hashtag NQF Trends. Shall I repeat that? Hashtag NQF Trends. In fact, it's on your program, so you can please do so. We would like you to, to do that. We would like you to like things and so on. Now, speaking about Facebook, speaking about Facebook, one of our board members, Gordon Lowe, he's a person with a dry sense of humor, so he sent me this joke. He said one day a person walks into the library and the person says to the librarian, "I'm looking for a book." And the librarian says, "Can you give me the title?" He says, "It's called Facebook." Now I think the chairperson spoke about some of the important aspects and characteristics of the National Learners Record Database, or the NLRD as we know it. But let me also say that one day I was on a radio program, and I was on the program with one of the private providers that provides a verification service to the country. And in fact, this provider gets quite a lot of airtime. So they asked us a couple of questions. And then the private provider was saying that they've got a tremendous database. Their database is so big, it's got over 3 million learners. And I kind of chuckled, So they didn't ask me this question, so I just said at the end of the program, by the way, that our database that we've got of learner achievements is now over 17 million. So I'm not too sure how big 3 million is, you know. So the point I really want to make is that the NLRD is the biggest database in the country that has got all these learner achievements. Furthermore, we also know that the NLRD has got all the registered qualifications in South Africa on it. And so one of the things that people can do, whether you are a policy maker, whether you're a policy implementer or a policy beneficiary, is that you can go on and you can see what are the legitimate qualifications being offered in the country. But you can also have a look, you know, there's also who are the providers, you know, that is on, that has been accredited to offer this, to offer these qualifications. So given the size and given the kind of comprehensiveness of the database, we can see that it actually plays, you know, quite an important role. Already today I had something like 2 or 3 interviews, and after this meeting also there will be a few and so on. And one of the issues that people were very, that they kept on asking me was, you know, we said in our press statement that since 1995, or between 1995 and 2014, the learner achievements have actually increased on average per year by 3.3%. Now, I mean, that it actually means that there's quite a lot of records that came in, you know, over the last number of years. So with those few brag points, you know, to start off with, I want us now to move then to the next speaker. And it is a great pleasure for me to invite Dr. Shishi to the podium. Dr. Shishi is the Deputy Director General in the Department of Higher Education and Training. Now, I must tell you that, you know, he's in charge of, I think it is planning, policy, and strategy. Those are 3 big words, as it were. But the only thing I know is that if there's an issue with the NQF and so on, then I must go to Dr. Shishi and talk to him. So it is an absolute great pleasure. Thank you very much for being here, you know, to support this event. Can we give Dr. Shishi a round of applause?
Thank you very much, Program Director. You are very kind. The Program Director is the CEO of SAQA. Thank you very much for the warm words of welcome. Allow me to recognize the chairperson of the SAQA board, Dr. Viela Tony Penga. I bring you the good wishes and greetings of the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Dr. B. Nzimande, and the Deputy Minister and the Director General, the entire staff, senior management in the Department of Higher Education and Training. I am not alone. I have Dr. Shelley Lloyd with me from one of the branches in the department to demonstrate our support to the important work that you are doing. The past and the present members of the SAQA board, the Chief Director for Curriculum in the Department of Basic Education, Mr. Suren Govender. It's very good to see you, Mr. Govender, after some time, and I'm really looking forward to further work together, particularly in the steering committee for the NQF, because that is the platform that presents us with a great opportunity to support the work that, the good work that SAQA is doing. I've not seen Dr. Rakometsi, but I would like to recognize Umalusi, in particular Dr. Rakometsi, and all the staff of the Quality Councils, Umalusi Quality Council that's here, and other Quality Councils within the NQF, the CEOs and staff of professional bodies, CEOs and staff of SETAs present and past SAQA staff. Ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate this opportunity in the Department of Higher Education and Training to participate in a program that is really important to us. I think if you, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, that if you were to look at the initial discourses around the establishment of, what we used to call the single system of education and training in the country, the actual establishment of SAQA was one of the greatest milestones in the history of education in post-apartheid South Africa, and I think we cannot forget that. Therefore, all of us have a duty to support you and ensure that you succeed in this very important national work. And I stand here on behalf of the department recommitting our system in ensuring that that is achieved. I'm delighted to be part of this launch, and I would like to make reference to the fact that in the last 20 years, as SAQA, you have provided information to policymakers, to implementers, and other beneficiaries that use information that is stored on the National Learner Record database. And therefore, the launch of this trends report, which is the fourth report, comes at a time when the stakeholders in the education sector are putting in a lot of effort to improve the coordination of education in general and the post-school education and training system in particular. The launch of this trends report comes at a time when the stakeholders in the education sector are putting in a lot of effort to not just to ensure that the post-school education and training system is successful, but to also ensure that we infuse the agenda of we've committed ourselves to a global agenda for education, and this global agenda emphasizes an inclusive, equitable, and quality post-school education and training system. And for that to be achieved, it is necessary for us to have a reliable and credible record of the achievements of learners in the Republic of South Africa. I think at some point, Mr. Samuels, you will recall the efforts that we put in the development of the examination system for the matric in the country, and the effort that it took all of us collectively to ensure that we build the infrastructure that currently is producing a credible system of the results. But all the time that we have had engagements around these issues, the top in the agenda has always been the NLRD, and to be part of the launch also is symbolic, of not only the importance of this work, but of, the trials and tribulations, the journey that we've traveled together, in building this system of education. And I'm fond of saying it's a single system of education and training. When you see different departments, basic education, higher education, you see science and technology, arts and culture, sports and recreation. Those are important components of education and chapters of education, and together those subsystems, if they operate in isolation of this understanding that we are a single system, it's unlikely that we achieve the objectives that we have set for ourselves at the times that we have and deadlines that we have set for ourselves. And the biggest challenges that we've identified in the PSET system is well known. Particularly, I want to cite the articulation. We have published an articulation policy, chair of the board, and in the last CEO committee meeting of SAQA, we received a report to indicate that SAQA has gone ahead to ensure the implementation, the successful implementation of the articulation policy, and I've reported that to the minister. And we are grateful of the strides that have been taken by SAQA to ensure that without a waste of time, these mechanisms to steer the system are not only just put in place, but they are implemented. And I think that is the reason why we are confident of the success of our effort going forward. In December 2016, this articulation policy for the post-school education and training was published and by the minister. And the policy itself aims at facilitating the movement of learners between and within the three sub-frameworks of the NQF, between institutions and also within the institutions, in order to enable access, progression, and mobility. Prior to the publishing of this policy, there were no regulated policies which specifically strengthened the articulation in the context of the National Qualifications Framework. And it's very important for South Africans to understand that the South African National Qualifications Framework is one of the most highly esteemed frameworks in the world. And amongst the three countries in the world that have implemented the National Qualifications Framework is the South African version of this work. And therefore it has become a standard in the world. And it is important for us to make it to succeed, not for our own sake, for the sake of our region, particularly the SADC region. I'm really, really happy that the CEO of SAQA, together with his team of capable leaders and educationists, they have supported the development of the regional qualifications framework. And I think that the last time I checked, they were chairing and steering that effort, which therefore ensures that within our own region, whilst we are confronted with challenges such as migrations within the SADC region, we are protected in terms of managing the labor force and the issues around the labor market intelligence, by the understanding that we are already doing work that will assist us in managing the issues around migration. We have just hosted the international conference on behalf of the International Labour Organization. And one of the key areas in the conversation has been the issue around migrations. A lot of progress has been done in the northern part of Africa, particularly in the ECOWAS region, and lots of progress in the eastern region as well. But there has been very slow progress within the SADC region. SAQA has begun this work in the development of the regional qualifications framework, and to me it begins to become an important building block to take us to the next level, where we catch up with the rest of Africa and the rest of the developing world in ensuring that we implement international conventions that we've committed ourselves that seek to ensure that there is an acceptable management of migrants in the world. So this work that I've cited, particularly within the articulation policy, further strengthens that effort. It spells out the roles and responsibility of the department, that of SAQA, that of the quality councils, and providers to make articulation a reality. There is a lot of work that has been done in this regard. I recognize that most of our critics would cite this area as, one of the areas where we have not made as much progress as our potential would suggest. But I would argue differently. If you look at what it means to do this in the context of the inherited legacy of inequalities in our country, you will understand that great strides have been made in this regard. The Trends report that is being launched today provides an empirical basis on which the policy intention of the articulation policy we can rely on. This is a very positive start, and because it allows, this is a very positive start because it allows us to work on real evidence on constructing an NQF that works for all the people of South Africa. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, that the articulation unit in the Department of Higher Education and Training will certainly use the valuable information contained in the Trends report to plot the way forward, not only for South Africa, but also for SADC and the rest of the continent. I urge you all to familiarize yourself with it, as it is a very insightful instrument in taking the education system forward. Whilst the fourth NLRD Trends report highlights the current instances of successful articulation, I believe there is still a lot more work to be done in our education system regarding this highly debated topic. And the report is helpful in its illustration of these gaps as well. It's great to see the output coming out of the NLRD as a fulfillment of its mandate, and I hope that this report will help in crafting the required strategies for the establishment of a PSET system that we can be proud of. The work contained in this report reminds us all of the work that still needs to be done in fulfilling our collective commitment to ensuring that effective articulation happens, and overall to the education and training project that should contribute to the more inclusive growth and sustainable economy that will benefit all, but especially the marginalized sectors of our society. The World Economic Forum recently tabled a set of proposals on the basis of the so-called the fourth industrial revolution. And I think it is important for us as we plan and plot the way forward for education in our country, particularly in the context of today's launch of the NRD fourth report, to take into account that outside of this room, lots is happening. Out there is a lot that's happening that requires all of us to pay attention so that we are not left behind in ensuring that the education and training system in the country begins to deliver on the promises that we have made to the people of South Africa, to the people of the region, and the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Department of Education, I should take this opportunity to congratulate SAQA and to assure all of you of our commitment in ensuring that the NQF of the Republic of South Africa become a catalyst for change in education in the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sishi. when Dr. Shishi spoke, he reminded me of the many hours that we sat and we worked together. Dr. Shishi, before he moved to the Department of Higher Education and Training, and before that he was the head of education in KwaZulu-Natal, he was the chief director in charge of examinations in the country. And I must say that, it is under his able leadership that that system has been built. And I quoted him the other day. There was a dialogue going on about the currency of the National Senior Certificate. And the words that I quoted from him was this. He was saying that in exams, we don't need evidence. If there's a suspicion that there's something going on, then we will change it. I quoted this the other day, Dr. Shishi, because I think those words are words that has got such a lot of wisdom in it. Because if you want to build a system, and in particular an exam system, and you want to make sure that the credibility is beyond reproach, that has been the thing that drove the building of that system. So thank you, Dr. Shishi, and let us give him another warm round of applause. Now, we had a research seminar the other day, and there were quite a number of people in the room. Now, we also have our researchers here, in fact, and they did a wonderful piece of work by surveying all the universities and all the TVET colleges to see what is the kind of articulation initiative that was happening in the country. And then what happened was, when after the person, one of our partners delivered the speech and the notes were handed out, people got up and they walked out. And I can understand it, if you are from places people are busy, so if they have the notes, they go. I mean, I used to do it when I was a student. So what we decided today was that we're going to give the notes after people have spoken. So, you will get a copy of the trends report, but that is after Yvonne has introduced it. So the notes is there, so you don't have to take notes, you'll get it. But another important thing that we are doing today, apart from the overall trends report of the fourth in the series, we are also tonight giving out a little fact sheet. And this fact sheet has got to do with early childhood development and the qualifications achieved from 1995 to 2016. Early childhood development is a very important part of our education and training system. And one of the reasons why we decided that we're going to lift out of the trends early childhood development was because if you look at the kind of qualifications map in 1994, you would see that there were very few people in the country as a whole that had ECD qualifications. And in fact, it was only linked to a particular sector, largely. Very few people and so on. And so if one wants to really look at the impact of qualifications and so on, you need to look at that sector to see, what is the impact of the NQF. And so that is one of the reasons why we felt it's quite important to pull that out. But also, the other reason for having a fact sheet like this is to also indicate to the other sectors that similar exercises can be done to see in a particular sector what has happened, what are the kinds of articulation pathways, what are the things that worked, what are the things that didn't work, what are the gaps and so on. Whether people went onto these learning pathway highways or whether they actually did some spaghetti pathways. So what we have done also then is to invite the Department of Basic Education, because they've got a particular interest in early childhood development. So one of their responsibilities is to make sure that it gets implemented in the country. So we've invited Mr. Suren Govinda. He is the Chief Director for Curriculum in the Department of Basic Education, to come and to say a few words about early childhood development and the importance of learning pathways in that sector. So without any further ado, can I invite Mr. Govinda to the podium, and let's give him a round of applause, please.
The Program Director and CEO of SAQA, Mr. Joe Samuels, the Chairperson of the SAQA Board, Dr. Penka, past and present members of the SAQA Board, the DDG from the Department of Higher Education, my friend and old colleague, Dr. Sishi. Our paths have crossed many, many times over the years, going back to 1994, I think. CEOs and the staff of the various quality councils that are present, the CEOs and staff also of the CETAs and the other professional bodies that are here this evening. Then to the SAQA staff, both past and present, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen that are here, I greet you on behalf of the Basic Education Ministry. And the area that I'm going to be focusing on is ECD, as we call it in South Africa, Early Childhood Development. Interestingly, in the international landscape, the terminology is actually ECCE, as in Early Childhood Care and Education. And so perhaps as a country, South Africa might also need to start to consider how our reference to ECD could start to move in the direction of ECCE. But in focusing on ECD, which is a priority area for the Department of Basic Education, this whole approach to ECD is a rather comprehensive one that includes a focus on policies and programs, and it refers to children from birth to 9. There's often this perception that ECD is about the schooling system, and it's about grade R and the foundation phase in the schooling system. But the approach that is adopted in respect of ECD in the Department of Basic Education, to a very large extent, emphasizes the active participation of the children's parents, their caregivers, and what we refer to as practitioners in the case of pre-primary programs, and in the case of primary school programs, we refer to them as educators. So collectively, ECD seeks to ensure that there is effective participation so that there's a positive impact on the development of our children. Interestingly, when we look at ECD, we actually categorize it into groupings. And the first grouping, which has now caught our attention and we mandated to address, is the grouping of from birth to 4. The second is the attention that we are now expected to pay to 5-year-olds, and we've started to call that pre-grade R. Then there's a focused attention on 6-year-olds, and that's grade R, the readiness year, and that's to a very large extent currently where we, from an ECD point of view, spend a lot of our time and our effort and our energy. And then finally, as you move into the schooling system, then it's the 7 to 9-year-olds, and they are generally in grade 1 to 3. Also coming from the UNESCO conference on ECCE and the various presentations that were made by the renowned researchers and scientists there, particularly the neuroscientists, surgeons, the message that came out very clearly is that the first 2 years of the life of a human being are actually quite decisive when it comes to growth and development. And therefore, when we're speaking of birth to 4 cohort, and particularly the first 2 years, they should take on a much more important, a much more significant focus in our country. And arguably that might not be the case. If you look at the practitioners who work with the children in the early years, you will find that these are the practitioners who are the least qualified and therefore warrant special attention. The qualified practitioners and the qualified educators you'll find generally extend from grade R, but particularly grades 1, 2, and 3. So, when we speak of an ECD practitioner, the whole concept of using that terminology is wanting to suggest and define that this is a qualified person, a qualified person who is entrusted with the development of our children, and is therefore responsible for organizing a variety of activities that are intended to develop skills such as speech and writing and reading and motor skills and social interaction, and of course saving our parents sometimes the bother of having to have children running around all over the place from morning till afternoon. And so there's a lot of support and care and love that's given to these kids in the early years. But in order to also link to what's happening here today, I'm wanting to also very quickly focus on the significance of the development of the learning pathways within the basic education sector, and then to just reflect on what Mr. Samuels was referring to, the fact sheet and the fact file. It's for that reason that as the Department of Basic Education, we affirm our support for SAQA. We affirm our partnership with SAQA and in respect of this launch. And we really welcome the initiative because of the potential impact it can have on the basic education sector in particular, but on education as a whole. So if you look at the fact file and the fact sheet, what you will notice is that since 1994, there's been a plethora of legislation, of policies, of acts, all pertaining to ECD, and some of the attention has been on ECD practitioners. It started off with the New Democracy committing itself to the Reconstruction and Development Program, and an integral part of the RDP was the issue of human resource development and poverty alleviation. And so, well, at this point in time, government is still focusing on these key areas and having to deal with issues pertaining to access, equity, redress, inclusivity, quality, and also efficiency in the system. And there's no way we're going to be able to achieve these kinds of basic principles which may be used to assess the functionality of the education system in South Africa as a whole. There's certainly no way that we're going to be able to be functional without having properly qualified people, and hence the focus on ECD practitioners. So initially there was a pilot program that was developed focusing on career pathing, and initially it was the Department of Education, as they were then called, which constituted both higher education and basic education, that working alongside SAQA was first responsible for the development of a set of qualifications for ECD on the NQF level 1, 4, and 5. And for a long period of time, this was used by the sector. And so there was a focus initially on learning pathways for practitioners who were the workforce of grade R, because grade R has occupied our attention for a long period of time. And the main target group at that stage were these practitioners, and the level that we were targeting was level 4 on the NQF. But in respect of the level 1 qualification as it exists, this qualification serves a very important role and sometimes gets questioned, but it's very important in the sense that it seeks to acknowledge and affirm the competence that people have gained through experience and not necessarily through formal training. It also seeks to recognize that there are potential learners and educators who have not achieved an equivalent qualification, but who want to pursue a career in ECD. So the current situation is that the minimum qualification for employment of grade R practitioners is at NQF level 6. And much has been done in the sector in order to address this. A conditional grant was applied for, and National Treasury kindly acceded to that request, and that conditional grant was used for the training of practitioners. We We have something like 4,500 grade R practitioners who, via the grant, then qualified on NQF level 4, an ECD qualification. And several other initiatives have also been undertaken in conjunction with the expanded public works program, and there's also training that has taken place there. But more importantly, perhaps, let me focus attention on the National Integrated ECD Policy. Under the banner and the umbrella of this policy, which was approved by National Cabinet in 2015, the responsibilities for the rollout of ECD in our country was apportioned out to different departments. The Department of Social Development has a key role to play, so does the Department of Education, and so does the Department of Health and other related departments. But as a Department of Basic Education, we have been mandated, let's say entrusted. Wackhead on one of his programs during the course of this week was making reference to the genderized terminology that we use and making fun also of all of the words that have man in it. So I'm going to withdraw my use of mandate and say it's a directive that, that has come through from central government to the basic education sector, that it's our responsibility, and a core one at that, to ensure that there is a human resource development strategy for the sector, and that there is an early learning curriculum that has been that must be developed and rolled out. Internationally, at the UNESCO conference, South Africa was congratulated for the national curriculum framework that it has developed and is currently rolling out for birth to 4. For those of you who are not aware of it, for the first time in our country, we have such a curriculum. And gleaning from the conference responses, many of the other countries in the world have actually used our curriculum to strengthen their own, if not start developing their own. So we are very comfortable to say that, you know, we are on track to, in our endeavor to meet the challenges of the 21st century, linking not what we're doing in ECD to Sustainable Goal Development 4, which is a world priority. And then finally, colleagues, in complementing SAQA for this initiative, we want to also indicate that in the absence of reliable data, a national credible tool such as the National Learners Records Database becomes particularly important. And therefore, you know, this launch takes on another significance in respect of education. And such information and the data that is provided will enable us to plan a lot more effectively and efficiently and direct us on a path that we would need to follow. Mr. Samuels referred to the fact sheet, and I just want to indicate that, you know, in respect of using the information on this fact sheet that will be shared, it shows that before 1994, there was very little happening in the ECD space, and that you will see thereafter, after 1994, the huge activity and the huge strides we've made as a country in respect of practitioners, training, development, and a focus on ECD. So while there is vertical articulation across the NQF levels, and that appears to be the popular pathway, but at the same time, it's very interesting to note that there are also diagonal articulation, and that has also taken root, and one wants to appreciate that also. So conclusively, to SAQA, our congratulations and our compliments. The NLRD has exciting insights. We look forward to the timely submission of data from all of the providers. And this will actually reinforce the DBE strategy in developing, maintaining, and supporting a South African education system that is appropriate for our children and meets the demands of the 21st century. So having said that, I bring you the warm wishes, the greetings, and more especially the compliments and the congratulations of the Department of Basic Education for the launch tonight. Thank you very much.
Can I say thank you very much to Suren? I think one of the things coming out of the fact sheet, for example, is if we look at that, these are some of the key achievements by the Department of Basic Education. What this would do, I think, it would give us a very good platform to, when we analyze the pathways in detail, to be able to call a summit, of providers and all the different players and say, look, this is how far we've gotten now. We are now thinking about, it is about the National Development Plan and so on and so forth. So what are the kind of effort that we need to put in place to take ECD specifically and dramatically forward? So there are lots of opportunities that I see in this work, and I want to thank Suren for also placing this within the international context. So let us give him a round of applause, please. Okay, we are now coming to the section where I'm going to ask Yvonne to come and to talk a little bit more about the trends report. But before I call Yvonne to the podium, I would like to say that Yvonne is one of those stalwarts of SAQA. She is been at SAQA for a very long time, and I think if one looks at the NLRD, for me certainly it is part of her life's work, and it really is about dedication, hard work, making sure about the quality of the data and so on. So Yvonne also informed us that she will be retiring in October this year. So I think part of tonight is also to say to her, thank you very much for all the work that she's put in. And I'm always sad if a person that has been at SAQA for such a long time is wanting to say goodbye. And I keep on holding on, and I say, hey Yvonne, maybe you should rethink this. But I think her mind is made up. So Yvonne, thank you very much for this wonderful piece of work. Let us give her a round of applause. I would also like to thank her for the commitment and the years of hard work and that she has put into building this world-class, credible database. So this is then the moment that all of us have been waiting for. So I would like to call Yvonne to introduce the trends report.
Thank you, Joe. You stole my thunder a little bit asking my team to stand up. I thought I was going to do that, but it's fine. We're really excited to be doing this launch today. And yes, it is the culmination of a lot of work, and there will be further trends reports, so really keep watching this space. But a particular dedication to our beloved Matthews Pena, who was a data analyst with us, and we heard he had passed away on Tuesday. We had to board him medically during last year, and we missed him terribly, and his biggest dream was to come back. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case, but he was instrumental in developing quite a lot of the methodology that we have used in this report. So I want to dedicate my presentation to Matthews. Also, special thanks, Joe did mention the National Student Clearinghouse in the United States, and the two people in particular were Diana Gillum, who did most of the number crunching with us, and in fact, Tola went to visit them afterwards and heard a bit more and showed them some of what we do. And also Doug Shapiro, who came here beforehand to see what was needed and gather data. And please note, he is not related to me. He is their chief data analyst there. Tola Akindolani, who hasn't even been with us for a year yet. She joined in May last year and just hit the ground running. I know my team did stand up, but Tola, please, you personally, please stand up. Thank you. she's done an enormous amount of work on this and also on preparing for today. The Department of Higher Education and Training, thank you for all the support and the data, and also the Department of Basic Education, the same. The Council on Higher Education, which also runs the Higher Education Quality Committee Information System, SAQA manages it for them. Omalusi, the Quality Council for Trades and Occupations, and all of the other data suppliers to the NLRD, particularly the CETAs who've been giving data in for way over a decade now. And then we also have a lot of people who do an enormous amount of work in the background. Unfortunately, most of them aren't here today. They're doing the work in the background. But they really manage servers, do maintenance, do all the firmware, all sorts of other things that keeps this amazing system running. Way back, it was designed by PricewaterhouseCoopers Canada, and they did a superb job in making a system that can go and go and go and have all sorts of things added to it over the years that we never dreamt of when it started. And my directorate, so we do have we have enormous amount of interaction between the groups in the directorate, but loosely speaking, we have the data loads team and capturing quality information management. We have the data analysis team, and you can see the numbers there, the number of people, and the ones are the vacancies that we have at the moment, and the HEQCIS that I mentioned for the CHE. And then there's me, and there's Mamotsi. I don't know if she's in here right now, my secretary. I know she was at the table. It's also her birthday today, so you could wish her. But she really is a pillar of the NLRD, and many of the people have been there almost since the beginning. And they do an enormous amount of work, and quite a small group of people, actually. So, on to the report itself. A previous chair used to do this to launch a report. So we've now launched the report. And I'm going to just tell you what's briefly in it and then take you through some of the examples, and you'll be able to see it all over again when you have your own. It took quite a bit of persuasion for me to allow a paper report to be produced. I'm very much a paperless fan, and there's a CD as well which has exactly the same on it, but I do realize people value having this thing in their hand. And also, if you ask me some tricky questions just now, I might just have to peep, so that's fine. There are the sections on each of the sub-frameworks. So each of the 3 sub-frameworks will have their own section, and each of those has an overview by NQF level and field, and then it looks at the trends in demographics. So that's all about the trends from 1995 to 2014. Unfortunately, there's one gap in 2014, and that's the South African Nursing Council. We really did try to get that data in from them. It didn't happen. But everybody else did. Even we got the HEMIS data rather late, but we managed to sneak it into the trend. So that's there now. But you'll see that some of the graphs go down a little bit in 2014, and that was Nursing Council. And they have a lot of data, so you can see it. Then the next section, the big section in the book, is all about the pathways. And I'll show you a little bit more about how we defined a pathway. And in that, we'll look at the overall movement, the transition after the initial step for each person, the final outcomes, and also some common pathways. And then there are appendices that show notes, some acronyms, and so on. So looking at the trends. This shows what we actually took and analyzed over the years 1995 to 2014. So we did it by year, we did it by sub-framework, by NQF field. the 12 organizing fields which are listed in the appendix, and NQF levels 1 to 10, population group and gender. Then there's some qualifications where we had to work out which field was the main field of that qualification, because it doesn't actually get put into a field because it's a defill and that sort of thing. So we had to look at what supported that, what modules supported it, in order to see which field it was in. So looking at the numbers, total 11,383,846. That is over the 20-year period. As you know, the NLRD has 17 million people on it. The data goes back to 1900. We have some data from the Human Sciences Research Council, the ex-register of graduates, which was all migrated into the NLRD. So we have data from before and after the 20-year period in question. But this is the number of achievements, of qualifications during that period. You can see the big blue is mostly senior certificates, so general and further education and training sub-framework. The OQSF, we actually did divide into nursing and the rest, because otherwise nursing would just swamp all the other graphs and they'd be sort of down at the bottom. So we did take that out. So even though we don't have the 2014 SANC data, we have a lot of nursing data. And then higher education, 2.5 million as well. And that is a picture of the trends over the 20-year period. Of course, you can see all of that in detail in the book. If we look at the number of qualifications awarded per field, this diagram actually isn't in the book, but I just thought I would tease it out to show you the share, if you like. So per field, not including further education and training, general, senior certificate and so on. Also not including trades and not including some that actually do have an undefined field. We're looking at the rest and seeing there you can see field 3, business, commerce and management studies, expected to be a popular field. The data shows it quite clearly. Field 5 also, education, training and development, and then you get field 6 as well, manufacturing, engineering and technology, and field 9, which here does include nursing. With yesterday having been International Women's Day, I thought I would pull out some of the gender data in particular. You see in the book there will be gender, population group, and then also various other aspects of the trends. So looking at the general and further, we do know that there are slightly more girls than boys in the country, and so does their trend show the same. But every single year in the 20-year period, more girls than boys achieved in general and further. Excluding nursing, the OQSF, you can see a bit of a slow start. That's when all the CETAs were starting up with the CETA qualifications, the then ETQAs, Education and Training Quality Assurance Bodies. So that took a while to get going. It also took them a little while to submit data, but they did retrospectively, and we hugely appreciated that. And just as an aside, we find that a lot of our work is not managing information. It's managing the relationship between people and information. But there it came, and that's what you can see for gender for the years in question. And you can also see that even excluding nursing, there is a bit of a dip in 2014. We do find that people add supplementary data later. It takes a while to gather everything from all the providers. And I know it's very frustrating for some people who would like the data to kind of stand still once we've got it. The NLRD's never stood still for a second. It's always getting more retrospective data. Later, people get things digitized and so on. So you can see that happening all the time. Here's the nursing, and also to be expected that you'd have a lot more women than men in nursing, but you can see there are men every single year. And then higher education. You can see here, there was a brief time when there were more men than women, right at the beginning of the period, and then after that, the women overtook the men every year. Of course, this isn't looking at which qualifications, which levels, who got the PhDs and who got the jobs, but that is a story for another time. Looking at the trends by population group for the whole lot, that looks really funny. The unknowns go along there and then they drop. That's actually, we found that Uma Lucy managed to start talking about the actual population groups when they started the National Senior Certificate Achievements. Before that, they were just all coming in as unknown. So you can see that's what I'm talking about there. If you actually apportion the unknowns across whatever else is known, this is really what it looks like. So that's probably a much more accurate description of what we've had over the years. Moving on to the pathways, and by the way, there will be a chance for clarification questions and discussion and challenges and all the usual kind of stuff. But looking at the pathways now. And this, by the way, was just a fun diagram that I did quickly, and then it kind of turned into something else later, so I'll show you that too. What we analyzed for the pathways, we were looking at the achievement of qualifications and the granting of professional designations in chronological order for each person, but grouping them, of course. So it consists of one or more qualifications identified by the field, the NQF field, or further education and training as a kind of a pseudo field, the sub-framework, and the NQF level. Or a professional designation. We didn't split them into different sectors or what they are, or what underlies them. We just said anything that's a designation, either at the end of a pathway or somewhere in the middle, chronologically, is a designation. And then we had a look at them. We actually got a lot. We found 35,000 different pathways, but some of them, of course, only each had one person in them. But an example of one which is probably referring to the chartered accountant is 7,725 people in this particular period did it in the order of senior certificate and a degree on level 7, a degree on level 8, and then the designation. There are a few variants, that's why it's 7,000 and not more, because there are others who did the same sorts of qualifications but did things in different orders or did something in between. Looking at exactly what the parameters were for this. So we found that approximately 9.5 million people obtained something. So just now when we were talking about more than 11 million qualifications, that's qualification awards, because in the 20-year period, you've got a lot of people getting more than one. So it's actually 9.5 million people getting those 11 million qualifications. So there are approximately that many. And then we also considered the qualification and designation as a step, but we said that steps from before 1995 and after 2014 were completely not included, even if the people who had some steps in the 20-year period had also had preceding steps or later steps. We could have gone and looked at all of that too. In this particular study, we chose not to. Also, with learners usually taking 4 or 5 years between the completion of their first step and the completion of the second, we actually limited it to individuals who were awarded their first qualification or designation before 2010, which took the numbers down a little bit, and we then landed with about 6.7 million people. Then we found that by far the majority had just one step in the 20-year period, 80.2%. And we've had some interesting debates about whether a single step can be considered a pathway or not. In this particular one, we did consider it a pathway, but the jury's still out on that. You can just rather say single qualification if you like. Then there were those with 2 steps, 14%, 3 steps, 4.4%, 4 steps, 1.1%, and then there were 5 or more steps, 0.2% of the whole grouping of those 6.7 million people. We looked at the agreement between NQF field of the first and second step. You'll find there are various other checks in the book about different agreements and not agreements. I'm just pulling a few out here. So to explain what this actually means, what we're saying, for instance, for the top one, if the first step was in agriculture and nature conservation, field 1, 62% of the people who had a first step in field 1 also had their second step in field 1, and 38% of the people went on to something else. That's what this is all the way down. You can see the very high level of field agreement in field 12, physical planning and construction, 75%, and nursing, 76%. Nursing is very unsurprising. We do find that people stay there, do more than one qualification in nursing. Physical planning and construction maybe also has a logical explanation. And what we are also saying about all of these figures, we have said what happened. We haven't done surveys or focus groups or anything to ask anybody why they did what they did. And we are saying that that is an enormous opportunity for researchers in this field, that they can take a particular phenomenon that we've highlighted here and do a whole PhD on it. And we encourage that. I was interested to see one of the tweets had said, you know, are you a researcher in this field? There's this sort of opportunity, and some of the replies seemed to indicate that people thought that SAQA was offering a whole lot of research fellowships. Not right now, but I'm sure we could think about that. But it was very interesting to see how that had been latched onto. Anyway, coming back to this, you can see that in certain respects there's very, very high field agreement, whereas much less so in some of the others. And where it says trade, that's because some of the trade qualifications aren't actually registered on the NQF with their own level and so on. So we do ring fence them as trades, but people would have done a trade and then also after that a qualification in one of the fields. That's why that field agreement is so small. If you look at the change in NQF level in the same way, so now we're looking change between first and second step by NQF level of the first step. You can see some expected results and some maybe not so expected. For instance, one that you would expect to have very little field agreement between the first and the second is NQF level 4, and so you have it, 6%. So 71% went up, but also 23% did something below level 3. They might have done an occupational qualification, something else, below level 4. And almost nobody went on to something other being a professional designation or a trade. You can see at level 10, 25% of people have done more than one qualification, both at level 10. But of course, a lot of people would do something else, possibly change direction, so they'd go on not only to another level, a lower level, but probably in another field as well, 69%. And we could also mine the data further and see whether it was the same field as well as a lower level, all those sorts of things. We didn't do it in the book, but all of that can be done. So you can really see where the similarities and differences are between the first and the second NQF level. You can see level 1, very few people did a second one on level 1, which is exactly what we would expect. Now we do it by sub-framework. So that's the third element we were looking at. and agreement between sub-frameworks. Starting on general and further, very few people did more than one in general and further. They went on to something else, for instance, nursing or higher education. People who started in the OQSF, 18% stayed in the OQSF, and 55% went into nursing. So they did something else in the OQSF and then went into nursing. 27% went into higher education, and so on. So one can sit and ponder the possible reasons for that. Looking at the most common 30 learning pathways followed between 1995 and 2014, we took out the further education and training one, because that one had 4.45 million people, and that's a single step one of that. So if we'd put them in there, everything else would be in the corner. So it's the next 30 after that first very, very popular one. So out of the 6.7 million people, 4.45 million people actually had got that single step one. If you look at these ones, you see the very pale ones have one step, the next density has two steps, and there's only one in the top 30 that has 3 steps. And this is the top 30 of 35,000 pathways. But as I said, many of those had only one person in when you get down to the very rare ones. So more than half of the whole had only one. So more than 70,000 people have a single step in that 20-year period in education, training and development, level 6. And then you see the next one, manufacturing, engineering and technology, level 3. And then in the middle, you've got the one with the 3 steps, which starts with senior certificate, then it goes on to business, commerce and management studies, level 7, and then level 8. This one doesn't have a designation at the end of it. There's more than 20,000 that don't show a designation. Much further down is the one that I mentioned earlier with 7.7 thousand that does show a designation at the end. A few of the points that these graphs make is that we wanted to know how many pathways mentioned both the OQSF and the HEQSF, because we were wondering what scope is there for movement between the two. And we find that 9,819 mention both of them, but only 2 of those pathways have more than 1,000 people out of the 6.7 million people we were looking at. So that's small. We see that 16,312 pathways mention general and further, while 19,505 don't. Some of those would be because they started that before 1995, but others we don't have the data at all. 2,402 mention designation, 13,199 mention NQF Field 3, and so we go. So there are various, many points that one can tease out just looking at the data, filtering it in different ways. What we also did, Joe then said he likes this red arrows diagram that I had just been playing with, but he wanted to see what it really is. So we took the top 30 and we made that into a real red arrows diagram. And that's what we found. And it does actually visually tell us a lot. All the blobs are single step or single qualifications, including, you can see the senior certificate. What we also needed to do in order to get more meaning out of this was to not split it by NQF organizing field. So these ones are looking at NQF level and sub-framework only, which is why there's slightly more senior certificate people here, because it got collapsed into just those. You can see people moving down levels, you can see an enormous amount going up from general and further into higher education. And you can see people going across from general and further into the OQSF, some going down, some staying on the same level, and some going up. But what you don't see at all in the top 30 is going from OQSF level 4 and below, or any, into higher education. We tried the next 30 and the next 30. It's somewhere on the border between those. I think it's around about number 60, where you see the first one with a few thousand people in it that is showing movement between the OQSF and the HEQSF. So that is, we were talking earlier about gaps that this highlights, because this is showing where there is articulation and where there isn't articulation. So we can do research to find out the reasons, but we can also look at this data to see exactly what must be strengthened now. As Joe also said, we can do these diagrams for any sector. People can come and ask for them just for a handful of qualifications, for an entire NQF subfield. We can actually produce a series of fact sheets. We want to know what is most wanted, so we'd really like that feedback too. So that maybe has given you a little bit of food for thought. There are more pictures in the book, and also the CD that you'll be getting has the same, so you can look at it on your computer as well. Thank you.
Okay, what I wanted to show you quickly was, this is the top 8 on the, here on your left-hand side, is the top 8 learning pathways that in early childhood development. And this is, and this year you would see this is now including 94, so it is 94. And you can see there the number of qualifications is about 535, and then if you add up all of these things, you get something in the region of about 752 that achieved at least one ECD qualification up to and including 94, okay? Now, if you look now 20 years later, which is this one, you can see there, one of the things that we didn't see on the top 20 was people are able to move from the occupational qualification sub-framework into the higher education sub-framework from level 4 to level 6. And there's a set of qualifications there. We know exactly what those qualifications are. So the ECD field shows that it can be done, is the one thing I want to say. Then secondly, you would also see that in general, we don't think too much about workplace qualifications in South Africa. And what the early childhood development field also shows, in fact, that most of the qualifications that people have achieved through the funding and other kind of support that the Department of Basic Education has given, they really have focused on workplace qualifications and so on. And so from that point of view also, you can see the kind of leading work that was done by the department. A figure of 752, and here you can see, for example, if you look at the blob at level 4, there's 21,169 learners, people with NQF 4 qualifications that is sitting there. If one further looks up, that at level 5, there's 4,324, and then further up at level 8 is 1,142. So there are large numbers of people there. And so earlier when I was speaking about this idea of talking about a summit and so on, if one looks at this, it really is able to propel this field forward if we make a concerted effort. So, so this is just, an example of one field. Okay, having said that, what I would like now to do is I've thanked Yvonne and I've thanked the team. I also would like to say a special thank you to our advocacy, communication, and support team. We call them the ACS team, for putting this event together. They've done a lot of hard work. In particular, I would like to keep, if we keep in our thoughts, the director. He just started in January, but unfortunately he took ill, a few days ago. So unfortunately he can't be here. But Lucas Malembe, who's the deputy director, has stepped in and so on, and Lucas is here tonight. But also the team for having organized this. Can I ask the ACS team to please stand for a moment if they're here inside? In addition to the ACS team that is here, there are also other parts of the SAQA staff. They are the kind of team that is busy with tweeting. So let us, where's Carmen and them? Are they outside? Okay. So, the other team is outside, and then the team that has been tweeting here, also let us give all of them a round of applause. I would also like to say thank you to the organizing team that put all of this together, and because all the work that they do often, kind of go unnoticed. Let us also say thank you to the hotel for providing the space for us so that we can do this. And then lastly, I would like to say thank you to all the other SAQA staff members that especially came out here today to assist. And then the most important is thank you to you for coming and making this evening such a special night for all of us. Thank you very much. Drive safely, and we'll see each other over the finger lunch. Thank you.